Good evening. Welcome. 365 days of amazing stories. Here we are on day 207. I'm continuing stories that are related to my investigation of anthroposophy, which is something that Rudolph Steiner created. It's the kind of spiritual study, the study of spiritual man. I think man, posophy, spirituality, humans' spirituality. Now, it's interesting. Rudolph Steiner, I have a hard time reading him. I have a lot of his books because I was a Waldorf teacher, and people would rave about some of his books. We had to read a number of them, as Waldorf teachers. They were interesting, illuminating, and I found incredible things happening because of that direction that I took to be a Waldorf teacher. I ended up making musical instruments and was really guided to make musical instruments in a way that followed the guidelines that music people and that whole Waldorf movement gave me. I made lyres, Lyres, and probably made and sold over 1,000 Kinderlyres. And they were really beautiful instruments that had an incredible sound tone for children up to the age of 9, really. And the cool thing about them was that no matter what note you played after another, it all sounded in harmony because it was the pentatonic scale. 7 strings, G, A, B, D, E. And there was D, E in the beginning, so it went D, E, G, B, D, E. All those notes are in harmony with each other, which is what childhood is about. In childhood, everything is basically in harmony with each other. I did make some larger chromatic lyres as well. Some that were strung just like a piano is tuned. The one that had the most strings that I made was 27 strings. And lyres tend to have an open part of the body and then a sound, a place of resonance body, that has like a hollow in it so the sound can resonate. Anyway, the one thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was a certain lecture that Rudolph Steiner gave. It was back in 1919. I could look this up probably on my computer and find out actually what lecture it was, and I will look for it as we talk. Anyway, in this lecture, he talked about how humans were going to be really challenged during the time that we're living right now. And why? Because we'd be confronted with an energy that he called Ahriman. Now, Ahriman is all about technology, schedules, hardening of the human spirit, polarity, like black and white, nothing in between. And what this energy would love to do is enslave humanity. It's almost like out of a science fiction movie or something. Some dark lord, kind of like Darth Vader, who wants to enslave a population, do away with them in a way. But Ahriman supposedly would like to enslave humanity. Now, if you think about the times that we're living in, It's almost as if people are becoming enslaved to this thing that you're listening to me through. Technology has taken a grip on us that's absolutely unbelievable. I think the question really that we should be asking ourselves is, how do we use this technology in a way that doesn't leave us beholden to it completely? The other day, the internet went down, like in our area, computer systems went down, and all these places where you buy things couldn't do business because they couldn't run their cash registers. It's pretty interesting. Pretty interesting that we're that committed to using this technology in order to get things done. I grew up in a time when it didn't exist. Everything was just fine. If you needed to go somewhere, you got directions from somebody. And they included landmarks, so you could actually get there by looking at the landscape instead of looking in a little screen to see when to turn left and when to turn right, how close you were, and all this other stuff that comes through your screen. Yes, it's convenient. Yes, you're less likely to get lost unless you're chitter-chattering away and you slip by where you're supposed to turn. But then, how cool is it? It redirects you. Anyway, Rudolph Steiner in his lecture, and his lecture was called A Picture of the Earth, Evolution in the Future. Lecture by Rudolph Steiner, Dornach, Switzerland, May 13th, 1921. Over 100 years ago. And he wrote about some pretty crazy stuff. Now, one of the things that I found, one of the most interesting things, was he talked about these days that we're living in right now as a time where we would have spider-like creatures that had great knowledge but no wisdom. Spider-like creatures in their movement. You know how spiders move. Maybe you don't because you haven't watched spiders, but if you watch spiders, they move and stop. Great knowledge, no wisdom. I mean, you must know what this is, right? It's robots, artificial intelligence. Look where we're at this point. You can do all kinds of things. I have a Tesla Y. Basically, it's like driving a robot. It once avoided a deer on Highway 1 much more quickly than I could have. I'm going to just cut to the chase here. How would you enslave humanity, as Ahriman supposedly hopes to do? In my opinion, you would try to create a population that could not perceive the truth. Now, interestingly enough, back when genetically modified organisms were hitting the market big time, some of these Ayurvedic doctors began saying that they could feel the influence of these genetically modified foods in a person's physiology. Why? Because a genetically modified food is completely altered in a nanosecond when one gene is spliced into another. Perhaps a salmon gene is spliced into a tomato gene so that tomatoes do not freeze. Salmon don't naturally copulate with tomatoes. And so here we have this morphed organism that our bodies don't really recognize, because we've perhaps evolved along with the earth over thousands and perhaps millions of years. Earth, according to Earth science, is about 4.6 billion years old. That's a lot of years for evolution to take place to create this current situation that we're living. So, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the founder of the Transcendental Meditation movement, from what I can remember, at one point said that if a person consumes enough genetically modified foods, they will no longer be able to perceive the truth, because their physiology will be built up on what is not natural. What country has the most genetically modified foods? The good old USA, United States of America. Monsanto has taken care of it. And if you want to look into what Monsanto has done to farmers and just the quality of our food, that is worth looking into. What are some of the most prominent genetically modified foods? Corn, soybean, tomato, potato, wheat. We could just stop right there, but let's go ahead and add canola to that. Start checking ingredients of the things that you eat, especially if you're buying from grocery stores and it's processed food. Oh, cottonseed is in there as well, genetically modified. Now, what does genetically modified organisms do for a farmer? Well, they can plant their crop, let's say corn or soybean, and because the food or the organism's been genetically modified, it's not subject, will not be killed by the application of Roundup. I believe the chemical in there is glyphosate. So you can spray the heck out of your fields, and your soybeans and corn just do great. There's no weeds. How easy is that? Anyway, start looking at how many things have corn syrup in it. Canola oil, soybean oil. That alone is enough. And think of how many people are eating all that stuff up every day in pretty great amounts. And then look at how blind people are to follow along with the government that we have in place year after year, decade after decade. We think they're telling the truth. Maybe some of them are, but man, I've watched some of our politicians speak incredible lies and have huge percentages of our population just go right along with it. All right, food for thought. And you might want to look that lecture up again. A picture of the earth, or a picture of Earth, evolution in the future. Dornach, Switzerland, May 13th, 1921. All right. Thanks for joining.